Hello and welcome back to the Planning Pulse podcast. With you as always, Matt Harbison, Principal Practice Lead for Workday Adaptive Planning at Ikorio. Again, joining me for the continuation of our ML Forecast mini-series, Tom Trammell, our Senior Solution Strategist. Tom, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
I love it. I love it. I know last time we were here, I picked on you a little bit about your New Year's resolution. Have you had any time to think about it or reconsider
Yeah.
what your New Year's resolution is going to be this year?
You know, uh, my wife and I talked, we have goals of traveling a little more, so that involves, not straying too far from last time, but getting the finances in order so we can plan some bigger trips. That's something we've always wanted to do. So it's on the roadmap eventually. So
I
that's
love
the
that.
goal.
I love that. When you think of bigger trip, are we talking like somewhere in Europe? Are we talking about
Yep.
Hawaii? What are we talking about?
Yeah, Europe, that's something that her mom travels to Europe all the time, so she's just itching to go, and so we're trying to plan and get everything set so we're not, you know, we can have a good time. We're not skimping out when we're there. We
Absolutely.
want to make sure we've got the funds so we can actually have a good time and not worry about it and come home and
Absolutely.
just be able to have a good memory. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Travel more is a great resolution. I'm glad that
Mhm.
you took the time since our episode last week to think a little bit
Yeah.
more about sort of what your goal for 2026 is going to
Mhm.
be. So, speaking of 2026, as we talked about in our last episode, we're kicking off a new mini series for ML forecast technology. Along the way, we're going to be talking about some upcoming product releases for different enhancements for AI ML technology, how you're going to be able to utilize those inside of Workday Adaptive Planning. But today we're going to continue talking about ML forecast technology. Episode one, we really sort of scratched the surface. We started talking about operating expenses, sort of that low hanging financial planning fruit. So we can just say, okay, let's take some of the burden out of our non-labor related operating expenses and sort of forecast that forward. Today, we're going to be doing something very similar. We're going to dive right into our topic. We're going to be actually focusing our efforts today on planning for attrition for our workforce. Now, planning for workforce through ML forecast technology, we're going to continue to expand into this topic in later episodes. But today we're talking about high level attrition forecasting. So, as you can see, I'm inside of Workday Adaptive Planning here. And for those of you who maybe either missed or skimmed through episode one, ML forecast technology is readily available technology that you can find within model management inside of your Workday Adaptive Planning instance under this intelligent planning section. Now, if you don't have this section, if you don't see predictive forecaster, check your administrative settings, reach out to your instance administrator. If all else fails, reach out to us at Ikorio. We'd love to be able to help you with getting that fixed up inside of your adaptive planning instance. But since we're talking about attrition, we really need to start by looking at our workforce, our current workers. So if I'm looking at someone like Carol Lee here, who works in technology consulting, has a position, has all of this information inside of this personnel sheet. Keep in mind, personnel sheet is row-based model with columns or facts about our different employees for everything from cost center to company to start date, everything in between. Now, this is still going to be connected and integrated with something like Workday HCM or your HRIS system. You pick up some strengths by having connected with Workday HCM, being able to drill into the details of positions, workers, work tags, dimensions. But all of this information allows us to be able to generate calculations. Now, calculations are, just think of salary, benefit, taxes, headcount related metrics. Everything that you see here within our plan period, so January 2023 all the way through 2025, 2026. But we see here inside of our model that for Carol Lee, there's a termination date of May 2025. Now, this termination date is going to directly correspond with our actual position end date. So here's that position start, position end. Our calculations are referencing those drivers for us to say, hey, we need to stop all of our calculations. Now, we think of plan data or calculations inside of model sheets as helping with our future or forward looking forecast. But the reality is, we can take something like this termination date and start to layer that into our actuals to be able to predict our attrition for the upcoming year. What I mean by that is, inside of this attrition forecast model for maybe the Dallas office for individual contributors at the consultant level, we want to look at all of our levels or all of our sort of groups within consulting services, and we can see this direct relation of one termination back in May 2025. Now that ties directly with Carol Lee. So we can take our actual employment records and the calculations corresponding with those employment records to be able to count these as actuals that we can then use towards our attrition forecast. I know, Tom, when we're talking about workforce planning, we're talking about, attrition planning specifically. How are you talking about this with your customers and your prospects? Are you looking at, actual personnel records to be able
Yeah.
to predict forward looking? Are you looking at percentages? Are you looking at dollars? What are you typically going to be looking at?
Yeah, it can vary. Attrition is something that is hard to plan for. It's not something we necessarily want to have to deal with. We want to have, long-term employees that, can gain that institutional knowledge and continue to contribute. However, it's a reality. So, you know, you can spend a lot of time trying to be very, very detailed and very specific and get a good forecast. My recommendation typically when we start out is, let's think simple. Simple looking at prior years, trending, getting feedback from managers so we can, contribute to that forecast that way. Just, not trying to reinvent the wheel and trying to overcomplicate things. Just keeping it simple, looking at past trends, and then just putting something into it to account for attrition. Like I said at the beginning, even though it's not always something we want to plan for, but it's a reality. So just taking past activity, past history, is probably my opinion the best way to just give you some kind of a forecast in the future to take account for it in your plan.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice too, because when you think about adoption or digital transformation of processes, folks sometimes can start to really go, like you said, get really detailed, really into the weeds, really, drill down to sort of, boil the ocean whenever it comes to all of the planning processes that we're looking at. But the idea is we want to keep it simple because we want to be iterative, we want to be scalable, we want to adapt to change quickly. And by keeping things simple where we can, will allow you to do that. And we try to keep it simple with attrition forecasting. Let's look at who we had, let's look at who's left, and we'll use
Yeah.
that as a baseline for how we can predict what attrition we're going to have for the upcoming year.
Yeah,
So
because
since,
Matt, I'm sorry, no, there could be specific departments that just naturally will have that. Maybe it's a high intensity job, and every 2 years you kind of get a normal flow and a rollover, and those are trends that are easy to recognize and easy to implement. Don't have to, like you said, boil the ocean, don't even jump the shark. So just
yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And when we're thinking about departments or different cost centers, those are some of the metrics or some of the ways that we can slice this data that's coming in. Other ways that we'll maybe we'll dive into once we start our ML forecast. So let's go ahead and because this series is about ML forecast technology, let's go ahead and run a forecast here. Now in this case, I've pre-populated some of the information. If you caught us in episode one, you as a user are not dealing with the algorithm, any of the back end logic that goes into our ML forecast. You're coming in, you're making a few drop down selections. In this case, I want to look at my attrition forecast model for the Planning Pulse attrition version that we're operating in today for the first 6 months of the year. Again, we know that we're focused on consulting services North America. We've got a few different dimensions and then an actuals period. Okay, that's what we're looking to accomplish here. This is what we're looking to forecast. So let's go ahead and run this forecast. Now you can see here last updated, last dates, all this information about it. But sort of as Tom alluded to earlier, you can look at cost center, you can look at positions or departments. You can look at a number of different ways of pivoting this data. Some of the ways that you may think about is if you've got, hiring managers or if you've got managers of particular locations. So you can start to say, okay, which manager is good at keeping their staff? Those are different things that we can do by leveraging the direct connection back to the source system. We're bringing all the information about this employment record to be able to, help in some of our data or some of our results that we're seeing now. Now, in addition to, again, we're trying to get our forecasted attrition here. We've got our predictive forecaster agency. You can keep up to date with the progress that you're seeing. Outside of just our current workers and our attrition forecast model, we can also start to layer this into our dashboards as well. So If you've watched any of the episodes of Planning Pulse podcast, if you've ever seen a demonstration done by me or by Tom or anybody at Acorio, you undoubtedly will have seen some type of active dashboard. Workforce planning and attrition forecasting are no exception to that. We still want planning to occur inside of a planning dashboard. You can still see that we're working left to right. So top-down forecasting, skill forecasting, cost analysis, even attrition analysis here as well. So as you're going through the workforce planning process, as you're starting to adopt things like the ML forecast technology, you can also layer in attrition forecasting inside of your dashboards like we're seeing here.
And Matt, often people look at adaptive and these type of tools as, FP&A. That's the FP&A's world. This is what they do. I don't, it doesn't apply to me. But really, as we're demonstrating here, adaptive is for the business, for the human resources side, the sales and planning side, and then, the standard corporate FP&A side. So very flexible, and you can use it for all and a holistic, comprehensive planning process, not simply just the dollars and cents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you phrase that because it is meant to be a planning tool, whether you're FP&A, whether you're
Yeah.
workforce planning, it is a cross-department collaborative tool. So love that. So you can see here that this planning pulse attrition forecast is run successfully. I can come back into my dashboard. I could refresh my planning sheet. I could have been in my attrition forecasting model still here as well. But here you can see the first 6 months of the year are run. It's looking at historic numbers to be able to produce our forecasted attrition. Of course, we could layer in additional levels, additional job profiles and locations all in the same view. But for the purpose of today, very quick, couple of minutes, it's going to help us predict forward-looking forecasts as you're going into your hiring plan for the upcoming year. We know that we want to bring on these many people. Great. Are you factoring in attrition into those numbers? This will help you do this. This will help you make some of those informed decisions as you're going through the hiring plan for the upcoming fiscal year. So I know that that was a brief look into attrition forecasting utilizing the ML forecasting technology. We previously hit on operating expenses. We're going to hit on a few more topics as we're going through our machine learning forecast mini series. Tom, anything that you want to leave our listeners with for today?
Um, you know, just, I've said it before, don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to play around with it, see what this does. What does this drop down do? What does this do if I check this box and run my forecast? Be curious, and that's going to spark ideas and, add to the value and the overall quality of your plan, rather than just, sticking to the same old, normal processes. You're not, nothing new is going to come out of that. So things like the ML forecaster and a lot of the other functionality that are coming down the road into Workday Adaptive Planning is going to expand your abilities. And so it's just about going out and discovering all the functionality and what it can do.
Absolutely. I love that. And
Mhm.
you say be curious. It's got me thinking about Ted Lasso now too. So I'm gonna have to go
Yeah.
back and maybe spend
Yeah.
some of the evening tonight rewatching some Ted Lasso. But
Hmm. Yeah.
appreciate you hopping on, Tom. Appreciate everyone listening in, learning about the ML forecast technology. Again, today was about attrition. We're going to be focused on another topic next week as we continue on our ML forecast mini series. So you're going to hear again from us next week. You can plan on it.
Yeah.